When I first watched Star Wars Rebels in January 2015, I thought that it was one of the greatest Star Wars cartoons of all time. The space western aesthetics were back again, the character concepts seemed like a lot of fun, and because it was produced by the same crew members that worked on Star Wars The Clone Wars, I assumed that this new cartoon with a linear narrative would be even better than its predecessor. And then I realized that this was not an accurate assumption at all. The series actually lost a few of the elements that made it so unique in the first place, the protagonist didn't really change over the course of the story, and the show didn't really utilize any of its latent themes to their full potential. So, in other words, I was wrong about Star Wars Rebels. To understand why I was so receptive to this series, we need to establish that Rebels was the first Star Wars cartoon since 1986 that actually took place in the same time frame as the original Star Wars trilogy. In fact, up to this point, there were only like 4 animated shows in the entire franchise, being Star Wars Droids, Ewoks, and literally 2 different Clone Wars cartoons that take place during the time frame of the prequel trilogy. Don't get me wrong, I love both sets of Clone Wars, and I enjoy their aesthetic in the context of retrofuturism, but I can also definitely see how it might remind people of the whole blue screen CGI approach of the prequels, which I agree looks way too shiny and very much divorced from the space western aesthetic of the original films. So when Star Wars Rebels came along, it just felt refreshing to see televised animation that reminded me of when the franchise was a scrappy 1970s movie called Star Wars, to the point where its artistic designs were even based upon Ralph McQuarrie's concept art for that specific film. Rebels was a story where the good guys were a ragtag team of underdogs, and the bad guys were the establishment again, as well as where the scarcity of Jedi lightsabers made their utility in fight sequences all the more significant. Some people may not like the protagonist characters, but I think they originate from some genuinely fun ideas, like, what if there was a cowboy Jedi? What if Luke Skywalker was a street urchin? What if Princess Leia was the captain of the Millennium Falcon? What if Boba Fett was a Jet Set Radio character? What if Chewbacca could speak? And what if R2-D2 was more like a cat instead of a dog? I would even go as far as to say that my favorite elements of Star Wars Rebels are the villainous Inquisitors, because as miniature Darth Vaders, they provide a unique challenge for your protagonist while also being someone that they actually have a chance at winning against. Even if some of them are kind of like Team Rocket. The point is, Rebels had some legitimately good ideas, and I think that the show was at its best during Season 1, where the story took place in its own little slice of the universe, in which its heroes weren't the founding members of the Rebel Alliance, but random people operating on a smaller scale. As the story progressed, they crossed paths with other Star Wars characters, and the show began widening its scope in later seasons, which was fine to an extent, but somewhere along the way, these characters stopped feeling like they were regular people, and more like substitutes for the main characters of the original trilogy. Ezra Bridger, Kanan Jarrus, Hera Syndulla, Sabine Wren, Chopper, and Zeb Orrelios basically fulfill the same general action beats as watching Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, and Princess Leia, which also raises the question of, if they're just going to do the same kinds of actions as these iconic characters, then why do we even need the new ones to begin with? Why not make a Star Wars cartoon featuring Han, Luke, and Leia going on new adventures in the same way that the Clone Wars featured Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker? Issues like the lack of the original cast or any conflicts with comic book stories could have been easily resolved by casting voice doubles and choosing a different time frame to work around, which could have also resulted in stories like a cartoon based upon the Shadows of the Empire video game, or something that would be even more satisfying to fans of Timothy Zahn's Heir to the Empire series. I don't really care all that much about these novels, but if you really wanted to include the character of Grand Admiral Thrawn for the fans, you would put him in a story where he faces off against everyone's favorite characters from the original trilogy, not a story where he basically gets clowned on by a bunch of recent Star Wars OCs. And if it's not for the sake of the fans, then why is he even here? Why not just come up with some other new character to challenge your heroes and let somebody else introduce Thrawn in one of the Battlefront games or the comic books? Plus, this way you don't have to come up with some roundabout ending where it's not really clear whether he even survives or not. By performing the same nostalgic activities and appropriating a beloved antagonist, Star Wars Rebels opens the main cast up to comparisons against the very characters that made the franchise so popular in the first place. So to avoid this, I think that the series should have focused more on being a specific, unique story. I know time travel gets introduced near the end, and some of the crossovers were pretty fun, but I really feel like Rebels needed its own cohesive theme to tie everything together, which could have easily been explored via the character of Ezra Bridger. Because if you ask me, Ezra is not an inherently bad character. Yes, he is Space Aladdin, and yes, he is an annoying little brat with a gimmicky lightsaber, but that's exactly why he had so much potential. The idea of a Star Wars protagonist being a street urchin leaves him with plenty of room to grow into a wiser, mature Jedi. And given how much younger audiences will latch on or even relate to annoying characters, this makes Ezra a perfect avatar to impart valuable lessons onto a new generation. Ahsoka Tano was an irritating sidekick for the first few seasons of the Clone Wars, and she's now one of the most beloved characters in the entire franchise. So the problem isn't having an annoying protagonist, it's what you actually do with them. Because while Ahsoka changed over the course of her story, Ezra mostly stayed the same. Granted, there is an attempt to have his character develop via some great moments in the Jedi Temple, and when he learns that his parents are in fact dead, which was a genuinely brave decision that the series made. But whatever is supposed to be his character arc feels like it's based upon a fundamental misunderstanding of what Ezra's central character flaw actually is. His main issue isn't that he's too naive, that he's afraid of being alone, or that he needs a family. His main issue is that he's kind of selfish. After years of fending for himself, Ezra's base instinct is to put his own desires first, and the call to become a Jedi doesn't automatically make him a good person. It gives him a hero complex, where he pretty much does whatever he wants. So when Ezra assumes command of liberating his home planet near the end of the series, it actually feels like the opposite of where he needs to be. He shouldn't be learning how to become the most important hero who ever lived. He should be learning how to act like a team player instead of a leader, to listen to what other people are saying, to actually respect the girl he has a crush on instead of trying to impress her all the time, and stop being so full of himself. Ezra being responsible for screwing up his missions would be perfectly fine if the series used that as a moment to actually teach him something.
You disobeyed orders. I have no choice but to suspend your command.
Honestly, Ezra's act of defiance against the Emperor is a more fitting climax than his final moments against Thrawn, because in addition to being an empty gesture of fan service, Grand Admiral Thrawn is not as much of a foil to Ezra's character flaws as the dark side is. Part of the reason why the second season finale is such a great two-parter isn't just because there's a lot of cool stuff that happens in it, it's because it posits the idea of Ezra falling to the dark side of the Force, which makes perfect sense given what we know his character to be like, and left the series with a perfect opportunity to demonstrate how the Force in Star Wars actually works. While it's generally been used as a plot device that operates however the writers want it to, a more simple explanation of the mechanics could be that if you use the Force for selfish reasons, that's the dark side. But if you use the Force to help people, that's the light side.
A Jedi uses the Force for knowledge and defense, never for attack.
Which makes the idea of a gray Jedi less of an anomaly and more human, someone who cares about other people but doesn't deny their own self-interests. The narrative question at the heart of Star Wars Rebels shouldn't just be, what was the rebellion like before the first movie? It should be, are the rebels fighting because it's the right thing to do, or because it serves their own interests? Are you a hero because you want to help people, or because you want to feel good about yourself? Not only could this relate to the nuanced conflict between Mon Mothma and Saw Gerrera, it could highlight why Ezra's connection with Darth Maul is so dangerous, because while the character might also be rebelling against the Empire, his motivation only comes from a selfish vendetta against his former master. And in the end, Maul would prefer to satisfy another vendetta against Obi-Wan Kenobi rather than help fight against the Empire. The series should have been about selflessness versus selfishness. However, just because Rebels had the potential to do these things doesn't mean that it's secretly genius. It means that the show didn't really dive deep enough to really be considered a true successor to the Clone Wars. And over the years following its ending, it's even been outclassed by other narratives with similar elements. The Force Awakens is also a return to form, with the specific theme of in-universe Star Wars fans taking on the mantle of their heroes. The Mandalorian focuses on being a Kurosawa-inspired samurai space western, and if you want a Star Wars experience about a former Padawan apprentice fighting Inquisitors and going through an actual character arc, it's called Jedi Fallen Order, which is essentially better than Rebels in almost every conceivable way. And I'm not just saying that because the main character kind of looks like me. If I really wanted to nitpick this show, I could talk about how the animation has a little too much movement, or how the voice acting sounds like the English dub of a Japanese anime, but I think that what I mostly care about are the storytelling decisions. And at the end of the day, I still kind of like Star Wars Rebels. I still like the Inquisitors, the initial concepts for the characters, how this helmet design transforms to look like the Alliance Trooper helmet, how Pirate Captain Hondo Onaka actually became more endearing, and I even still like how there are so many side characters voiced by Steve Blum. So, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I wasn't wrong for enjoying the series, I was wrong for expecting too much of it, for getting caught up in how great it seemed at the beginning of the story. And that I was definitely wrong for saying that it was better than the Clone Wars, as well as acting like it was a true Star Wars cartoon just because of its aesthetic. I'm not making this video because I enjoy complaining about cartoons I like. I'm making this video because I want to set the record straight, that I was wrong about Star Wars Rebels. And hopefully, this will begin to make things right.